Thanks everybody for being here. Today's class, we'll keep it pretty simple. I recommend a block or two blocks and a blanket. And if you don't have any props, you'll be okay as well. We're going to start in a seated meditation. So go ahead and get yourself comfortable. I'm going to use a folded up blanket. And I think one of the most important things in this practice is to spend this time in a mindful way, calling in the support that we need. And that support might look like props, right? So if you've got a knee that doesn't feel happy, just prop it up. It might look like modifications of poses. And I typically, for things that are challenging, I do my best to offer ways to do the pose without stressing out your body, or ways to do the pose even if you don't feel strength wise prepared for that. So, always take the softer route if you have any question about anything. And by softer, I mean the option where 2 feet are on the ground if I'm teaching 1 foot on the ground. So we call in support and we use this time on the yoga mat to actually practice calling in support and calling in a spaciousness, so to speak, around us and around our needs today, and not what we project or would want our needs to be. Same thing with our bodies. How can we um, show some love to our physical form as it is right now in this moment, not as it will be in 2 months from now when you've completed all of the workouts or whatever it is. So find the kindness, the support, and the okayness with everything as it is today. That's going to be one of the themes. And the other theme of this class is, as I mentioned, going to be balance and literally balancing on 1 foot and what are the components of balance. So as you get yourself settled in whatever position feels good for you on a chair, cross-legged on the floor, etc., I invite you to notice what's called your base of support. Now, this has a physical therapy type of informative component to it, education component to it, but it also has a mindfulness component to it. So when we're aware of our base of support, we can create a presence rooted in our body and be less whipped up by the winds of our mind. So please place your hands on your knees. Wherever you are, roll your shoulders a couple of times. Invite in a full breath and invite this breath like you're filling up a bucket from the bottom up. And then exhale. Everything releases. Center your head over your rib cage over your pelvis. Pelvis resting on the center of the sitting bones. Eyelids heavy. The physical body will never be in the future and it will never be in the past. So tuning your awareness into where it is right now can provide so much presence practice. Scan your body for any places that you might be holding extra tension. Invite some spaciousness around that. letting that go. And let's bring our hands either over the heart like this, palms down onto the chest, or palms together, whatever feels better for you. And bring to mind one thing, one aspect of your life, one human, one pet that you're grateful for. And moving from that place of gratitude, we're going to slowly open our eyes and start to rock a little side to side. Arms can get heavy down in your lap again, or if it feels good, you can keep them over the heart and feel all squeezy cheesy. And then start to draw some circles. So this is really exploring the fullness of our base of support here in cross-legged, if you're cross-legged like I am, or if you're seated in a chair. And I want you to notice that we have like a pretty solid base of support. We can do a lot of things here. So some individuals don't have good balance in sitting. This is a real thing. But when you have a fairly young, healthy body, you're going to probably feel like reaching around is pretty easy for you here. And that's a blessing, a good thing to be aware of. And then I want you to notice how much changes when you just change the position of one leg, one foot. And it's like a lot less, a lot more restricted, or actually just a very different kind of base of support. So I have a lot more lateral room to this side, but a lot less room to the side where my knee bent up. Go ahead and try that on the other side while I fine tune a couple things up here. And just notice the difference one side to the next. Right? Very different base of support, hopefully symmetrical right to left. Bring your feet to touch one another in front of you. And then notice what this narrow base of support, so we have our feet on the ground and then more like the back of our sitting bones kind of rooted, where how much room we have to wiggle out of this and to reach, to lift, to pull. So this is one of the most important principles of balancing. And then we're going to come back to cross-legged if you're comfortable cross-legged. All right. We've gone over base of support. Let's bring the hands to the torso, one hand to the upper chest, one hand to the low belly. Connect your breath to this moment again. So our centered, our meditation from the beginning of practice. Try to stay aware of that. And it's not just for the mindfulness component, although that is number one. It's also for building some stability in our postural muscles. Our breath, believe it or not, is part of our stability, part of our postural upright system. And one could argue that it is part of our balance in that way. So I want to show you what I mean by that abstract statement. So let all of the air out of your body. And then notice how you can kind of noodle around, holding the air out. And take all of the air, and also, let's do this. All of the air out of the body, like you've blown up a balloon. And then see if you can roll forward onto hands or onto your knees or your shins, like I just did. I realize that's complicating things because it involves the knees, involves the hips, etc. But experiment with something like that. If you're in a chair, just stand up with the air out. And then take the air in, hold it. You've created this pressurized system, and rise up and notice if one of those feels a little sturdier, a little steadier for you than not. So the theory goes that that second version with the air in, with that sort of pressurized system in your torso is going to feel a little more solid for most of us. So we might use that a little bit later in class, but that's also just like a side note, something to play with and to explore. Go ahead and root one hand down. So if you've got your right hand down, you're going to put your left leg up or vice versa. And we're going to start to do a little wrist warm up and a little foot warm up at the same time. Before you do anything else, spread your toes here. Even if you need to use your hands to spread your toes, spread them using your hand. And then from this position, it sort of looks like we're at a picnic and we're about to get up. We're going to go to hands and knees. Keep your knees off the ground if you can tolerate it, and then come back into that original position. Spread your toes. Pay attention to what happens with your foot here. As you transition, your foot and your hip, everything kind of activate and transition with you. Coming back in, you're going to keep your foot on the ground, and now you're going to open your knee to the side 3 times. Watch how the arch starts to lift up in your foot. I guess that was more than 3 times. And then we're going to take it to the other side. So starting here, lift all 5 toes, spread them wide, lower them down, and to get this foot rooted, you've got your base of support, which is your foot and your hand now. And we're going to move from here to our table or bear crawl position. Back. If you didn't feel very steady in that, use the thing that I mentioned earlier, which is that holding the breath. And then once you're in it, let go. And then once you're down again, back into that original position, spread the toes, hold onto your big toe as needed, and let your knee go out to the side. Big toe stays down. You're watching your arch and your foot kind of get a little higher. You're watching your forefoot start to adapt to the floor. And then everybody come onto hands and knees. If your wrists are a little sensitive and you prefer to have your hands on blocks, that's a great use of blocks. Let's go ahead and just notice the base of support here in table. So much base of support. We can really move. We can really stretch and reach. We can really do a lot here in table. And so join me if you will. Feel free to cushion your knees with your blanket. Join me if you will in lifting your right hand and left knee and sliding them forward and back, sort of in front of and behind the other hand and leg. Now, this starts to put more of your body weight through one hand. So if that's a little much, come back to whatever wrist support that you need. And then go ahead and we'll switch sides. So left hand, right knee, lift, and they sit down in front of and behind, in front of and behind the regular table position. If you haven't already figured it out, this is working your hip quite a bit, and it's actually working your core quite a bit, in addition to the stabilizing muscles of the shoulder. And our minds, our mindfulness a bit. Come on to the forearms. Curl your toes and rise your knees here. And notice that even though we're in a constrained position, because we can't really do a lot of reaching, we still have some ability to go outside of our base of support, even in this funky dolphin shape. And you can also notice if you feel steadier on one side versus the other. We don't think of weight through the arms very often as a balance thing, but in this position, it absolutely contributes. Lower to your knees, rise up to kneeling, and inhale fully. Exhale. Inhale fully. Shift your weight to one side, take the other leg forward. Arms out to the side helps with balance. For starters, let's pivot on the back knee, wiggle the front foot out to the side, and do a little bit of warm up that looks kind of like a warrior two type movement. Rocking into it, saying hello to the hips. This helps to undo some of the sitting, perhaps, that we have done over the months, over the years, over the lifetimes. And then come on out of it. Notice how solid that base of support was. So this actually makes me feel like a surfer right here, right? Like I could completely surf the waves. But as we come back in, pivot on that back leg, make it parallel, your knee and your foot parallel to the edges of your mat. Make that front foot kind of hip distance apart, like you're on two little railroad tracks. It takes a different balance component to stay up right here. You can grab your block, you can pass it back, right and left, and just notice if you get any challenge from that. If not, wiggle your front foot closer to or actually in line, like you're on a balance beam. If you need a little more support, walk your foot out, and option to curl your back toes under. Real quick, if anybody is having just that knee discomfort right under the knee itself, you want to have the knee off of the blanket. Okay? So wherever you are, if you're here on the balance beam or wherever you are, see what it's like to add that heel up. Does that make it harder? And then maybe what happens if you take that foot entirely off the floor? That's really hard because my back leg is fully flipping up into the air, as you can see. So play with that a little bit, and then let's just drop in, bring our hands to the low, medium height of the block. Raise your back leg into this lunge, hip stretch, and then step your back foot forward, drop down into a squat, step your front foot back. From that lunge, lower the back knee down, wiggle your front foot out, create a big old base of support here. So my legs, those three spots, the knee, the foot, and the front foot, they are taking up, they're making like a big triangle, right? Tripod. And now I play with Warrior Two hips. I play with surfing. Might be as close as I'm going to get. And once you are ready, you can start to experiment with finding that more aligned, that more railroad track type position. So just experiment. Option to lift your front foot up onto the tiptoes and bring the block into your hands and start to challenge your balance a little bit. This is really fun if you have a ball also. One other component, other than the obvious musculoskeletal component of balance, is our eyes. And when you get into the position that feels most challenging to you, whether it's that railroad track, heel lift, or all of the above on the balance beam, you can hold it, experiment with closing your eyes, and notice how much harder that can be, how much more wobbles get introduced into your body. So vision is a really, really important part of balance. So is our inner ear. So if you haven't already tried the balance beam, go for it. Notice that your arms out to the side help with your balance in the same way that you see individuals who are more traditional peoples around the world sometimes carrying things on two ends of a stick across their shoulders, right? Like they'll have one large bag here, one large bag there. It's a pretty efficient way of carrying, and it keeps you more centered. So from here, go ahead and curl your back toes under. Take a full breath in. From that full breath, lean forward, rise up. See if you feel solid in doing that. That takes a lot of leg strength, but it is absolutely fundamentally worth working on. We'll get our blanket out of the way and keep coming back to class with me. And I'm always working on creative ways to get us on and off the floor. Let's go into a classic yoga balance position, tree pose. Rise onto your left tiptoes as you pour your weight into your right foot. Bring the sole, the foot, either into the kickstand position, the sole to the calf hug, or further up. We'll press our palms together over the heart. As I hold this position, I notice lots of really tiny little wobbles in my ankle, but it's relatively easy for me. One of the things I hear from yoga students very often, who sometimes become patients of mine, is that, oh, well, my tree is really good, therefore my balance is really good, or my tree is really bad, therefore my balance is really bad. And I'm here to tell you that balance is a lot more complex than just what we're doing right now. Shake it out. Notice how fatigued that ankle, that foot feel. Maybe even you'll feel it in the hip. And we're going to take it to the other side. So musculoskeletally, the feet, ankles, the hip, and then the trunk, as we talked about, are all really, really important. Kickstand position, calf hug, further up your leg, whatever feels good. Find your tree pose. After musculoskeletal is visual. And you can test your visual reliance by closing your eyes here and just noticing how much more challenged you are in staying up. For something that's a little bit in between those two, because it goes from kind of 0 to 12 very quickly there, you can just look around the room. So this is also a balance challenge, especially if you move your head, because it is adding a very different visual stimulus than the typical yoga instruction of staring at one thing, which is drishti, is incredible for mindfulness and mindful awareness, but it's not a big challenge for your balance. So looking all around, maybe above, and then come on out of that and notice if that was different than the other side, because we were challenging our balance. There's also something called dynamic balance. And so this is going to be a second layer of self-assessment. So that first thing was the static balance. The second is dynamic. Go ahead and stand on one leg and swing your other one back and forth. And the standing leg is going to have a little bend to it, and your arms are also going to move back and forth with this. So just notice if you can make it to 10 good swings that feel really natural and perhaps even grounded in your standing leg, this is a good indication that you have decent dynamic standing balance. You're going to take it to the other side. And remember, your standing leg is not locked out. There's no perfect position for your toe to be pointing or any of that nonsense. It's just in a position where it can adapt, right? And after 10 on this side, let's go ahead and give it a break. And let's combine those two. So something that looks a little bit more like a yoga practice and has some dynamism to it is what I would call a reverse eagle pose. So first, shift into eagle. Shift onto your right leg. Drop down like you're going into chair pose. Cross the left leg over delicately, and you have the option of tucking your foot behind your calf. But I have to say that when I get honest with myself, that doesn't feel good on my knee, so I stopped doing it. So from here, I want you to notice as you rise up, that takes a bit of balance. Getting into it is a dynamic form of a dynamic balance challenge. Getting out of it is a form of dynamic balance challenge. And then we're going to take it into the reverse, which looks like a curtsy lunge. So cross behind, and then as you come to center, draw your knee high. Use your breath, use your mindfulness. Make this yoga. Cross behind into your little curtsy lunge. Draw the knee high. Cross behind. Let your trunk stay stable. I'm not trying to go into a back bend here. I'm not trying to round my spine. I'm aiming to keep everything pretty stable. And we'll take it to the other side. Come into your eagle pose. Option to tuck the foot. Come on out of it. Notice that dynamic balance going in and out. Notice if it changes side to side variability versus that front to back variability that we did before. And then come into your reverse eagle. Leg goes behind, it's our curtsy lunge. Spine is neutral. And then rise into your high knee. And this high knee position is like a child of the yoga pose, Hasta Padangustasana, right? The A version. Instead of looking at performance, hamstring length, looking at something a lot more functional here. Bring yourself back to center. Set your feet nice and wide and bring your hands to your knees. As you shift a little right and left, you're going to feel all these little movements at the ankles, at the hip. You're going to hear all these noises from my floor. You can let your foot come off the floor like this, or you can really let the foot adapt and just appreciate how the foot adapts as you go side to side. Come back through to center. Lift all 10 toes. Spread them wide, fan them out from here. Use your hands if you need to. And then just shift, reach back, rise, shift, reach back, rise. Okay. And then wiggle your feet heel toe together. Find a distance that feels really comfortable, like one that you might stand in if you were just standing in line. And then notice how much you can move outside of your base of support here. I want to say one thing about moving outside of base of support. It's not always about quantity, right? Like there's a point at which it would be ridiculous to do this movement, right? To really, 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 really reach. But there's other things that are not so ridiculous necessarily. And one of the things I want you to look at here is trying to build some more symmetry into your body as you shift your hips all the way to the right. You feel all that weight pour into the right foot. How far does the hip go outside of that base of support? How far does the pelvis shear? And then check it out to the other side. How far does the pelvis shear to the other side? Are they symmetrical? So for a lot of us, I'm guessing you're going to notice one side's a little tighter. And maybe you want to play a little bit with that side, going to 9 o'clock or 3 o'clock, but also going a little to 2:30 or 3:30 or 4, and see if one side is different from the other, doing our best to build symmetry. Come to the front of your mat. If putting weight through your hands is something that doesn't feel that great, grab your blocks. Inhale, drop your ribs, rise up. Let's find our basic Tadasana, Hasta Padasana. I said that wrong, by the way. And put your hands down to the ground or to the blocks and step it back to plank. Squeeze your glutes, front hip points up, round your upper back. Lower down to your knees. Lower down to your belly. Float the chest, float the legs, coming into the back bend of your choice, actually, but my preference is for everybody to practice a little Shalambhasana, locust pose. Root down through the hands, rise back up to hands and knees. Readjust as needed so that you're comfortable, not so much about stacking, but actually comfortable in the wrists and the legs. And go ahead and reach one leg back. I want you to really, really reach up. See how far that leg goes. Not a competition, but just notice how far it goes. And then bring it back down so that it's kind of close in line with your torso, more or less in line with your torso. The opposite hand comes up off the floor. What stabilizes you? So probably here it's going to be your hip. You're not going to get a lot of stability from the foot. You might get a little more if you tuck your toes under the one that's on the ground. You're going to get some stability from the hand and from the sling of tissue from the shoulder that is connected to the hand still on the ground, all the way to the hip that's still on the ground. This is what's doing most of your balance, the hip, the shoulder, and that sling of muscles. Try to move your arm and leg a little here. Keep the back of the neck long. I'm swimming. And then root it down and shake it out a little bit. Play with coming outside of your base of support here. Maybe it looks like a funky child's pose going to one side and then the other. As you come back to center, reach your other leg back, float that leg, come onto your left fingertips, or whichever one was the opposite of what you just did. Oh, and you can go ahead and really experiment with how high you can get here before you lift your second arm off the ground. And then find neutral, find your Tadasana, and start to challenge your balance, challenge this sling of muscles. What do you do if you need more support? Well, you widen your base of support by setting your hand and your standing knee wider away from one another. That's going to be easier than staying on kind of a narrow balance beam. To challenge yourself, go more narrow. And once we're done with all of that swimming, reach it up and back, downward facing dog. Any wiggles you want to make here are more than welcome. I recommend maybe rolling over your toes right and left, spreading your toes, using the sticky mat to activate, lift your toes even, and then wiggle, hop, do whatever you'd like to get back to the front of your yoga mat. If you have the 2 blocks, have them handy here. Rise up to halfway up. Bring your toes to touch. Inhale, rise all the way up, however you want. And toes touching is another balance challenge. If like me, once you went into tree with your eyes fully closed, you kind of lost it and couldn't hold it for more than a couple seconds. This is actually a good position to practice your eyes being closed in. For one, it's much safer for most of us, not everybody, so I'm not prescribing this from a medical point of view, but it's pretty safe to have your eyes fully closed. And you can actually challenge your balance here. And with your eyes closed, you might even notice certain things about where your pelvis will move freely and where it won't, and what feels different right versus left. And you can work on that on your own time outside of class. Toes together. That's really what I wanted to teach you. This is called the Romberg stance in physical therapy. So from the front of the mat, rise one leg up. Take a little bend in your standing knee like you're going into chair pose, and slowly step your lifted leg back. Use your hands on the blocks as needed. From this lunge, rise the arms. Bring the hands together over the heart. And then let's pivot into that side lunge, Skandasana. Notice how your foot adapts. Notice how your hip adapts. Pivot right back to front. Bend your back knee. And we're going to step it right back to the front, okay? Drive the knee high if you are able. And then this time, tuck it behind. Find that curtsy shape. Connecting with flow, connecting with breath. Tadasana. Front of the mat. Start in Romberg stance if you'd like, toes touching. Little micro bend in the knees in a way that feels natural to you. So if you need to lock your knees to feel natural, that's okay too. Other leg lifts up. So maybe this is your left leg this time. Step it back, find your lunge. Take your time. That's your balance, dynamic balance right there on the mat. Inhale, arms up, find your crescent lunge. And then from here, pivot. Forgive the nature of this view, but you're going to keep that back foot, outer foot on the floor. Spread those toes. Yes. Drop into that side lunge. Notice how the hip, the foot, the ankle, everything adapts. And then pivot right back to center. Bend through that back knee. Draw it back in. Find your knee going high. Feel free to put your foot down in the middle of that movement as I did. And then standing knee bends. Tuck your foot behind for curtsy. Palms over the heart. Come back into our commitment to mindfulness. Inhale, neutral. Exhale, down. Stagger your feet a little bit here. We've talked about muscle, we've talked about visual. I don't know if we've talked too much about vestibular input to balance, but that's a really big one. Your inner ear is a really big component of your overall balance. And that's why if you're super dehydrated, or for people who, I suppose you can actually overhydrate too, and you don't have enough of appropriate electrolyte mix, you can get really dizzy. Shift your weight into your front foot and stay on the toes of your back foot. When we're walking, this happens each and every step. We come onto one foot, and for a brief moment, we're standing on one foot. As with most things in life, if you want to test whether you're good at playing piano, you try slowing down the song, the music, and playing it kind of like with passion, right? That would be the sign of maybe one sign of a good piano player, not the only one. But that same piano player, if they have the skill, they can also play it really quickly, right? Same song, but with a completely different energy. In movement, it's the same. We should be able to take what we do in walking and slow it down, right? And still be steady. This would be the musculoskeletal component of balance in walking. And we should also be able to go more quickly and maybe more explosively if we feel like that. But let's focus on this slow, steady one for now. You're going to pivot to the other side, have your other tiptoes up, down, one or the other behind you. Pour your weight into that front foot, draw the knee high and back and high and back and high and back. And then relax and front of the mat. Inhale, arms rise. Exhale, fold down. Your forward standing fold can look like anything that feels good to you. Step one foot back and lower to that back knee. Come back into your half kneeling position. Most yoga teachers from this position are going to bring us into this quote unquote deep hip stretch, which, by the way, if you really think about it, is mostly moving our low back. You can put your hands there and you can feel how quickly that becomes a low back movement rather than a hip stretch. So for the hip stretch component, just as a side note, you don't go too far. Shift your weight back onto the knee of that back leg. And again, line yourself up balance-wise. Get onto the balance beam here, the imaginary balance beam with your front foot, your back knee, your back foot. And just see what you can do to create more steadiness and ease in this position. Literally the definition of asana, steadiness and ease. We know that we can't change our muscles and our bones overnight. We can change our focus and get it really singular. We can add the arms out to the side. We can, if that's not enough, wiggle the foot a little to the side, opening up that base of support. We're going to take it to the other side now. So curl your toes, wiggle your front foot to the side, and then use your arms for a little bit of support, momentum, if you need it. And also use that idea that we spoke of in the beginning of class, that big stabilizing of the trunk, and come up, okay? And again, if that's challenging for you, we'll work on that. From Tadasana, we'll keep working on that in classes. Draw that other leg up, step it back. Lower this knee down, working on that up to down position. Essential. Check your gaze, check your arms. Slowly wiggle this foot in front. And also, I didn't say this explicitly last time, but you want to make sure to check that you're not in an anterior tilt of your pelvis and that you're not really going ahead of your base of support. Most of the base of support is going to be this back leg, especially as the front leg narrows in. Notice what might be challenging for you. Maybe it's that looking around. Maybe it's bringing the hands closer in so you don't have that ability to rebalance with your arms. And then wiggle out of that base of support. Curl, widen the base of support, curl the toes under, full breath in. Exhale as you come up. Okay. So last bit of standing business. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, right foot back, basic lunge, right? Notice that I'm really not that far into it because you really don't have to be to get the functional movement aspect of it. You're going to step your back foot over to the opposite side of the mat. So if it's your right foot that's back, step it over to the left side of the mat. And just notice how much different this feels. Cross your arms over the chest and either turn a little right to left, or if you need more support, stretch your arms out to the side. Good. Slide this back foot in, coming into your curtsy lunge. Rise, release, left foot back. Basic lunge. We're going to wiggle front foot over to the opposite side of the mat if you wish, or back foot out, depending on how much room you have. So the legs are kind of crisscrossing in the middle, right? And then if this is pretty easy for you, arms across the chest. Twist a little right and left. If this is harder for you, arms out to the side and either stay static or move. And then coming back through to center. Lean in a bit. Full breath as you exhale. Draw this back leg into your curtsy lunge, what I'm calling a reverse eagle. Inhale, rise up. Exhale, hands down to the blocks or to the ground. Bend your knees, step it back, find your way to kneeling. And if you feel comfortable sitting on your heels, go for it. I know this is not everybody's cup of tea, so no shame if it doesn't work for you. A, you can add a block. B, you can add a blanket stuffed back here between the back of your knees. And you can do anything. You can sit on like 12 blocks, a bolster, a chair, whatever feels good. I just want you to appreciate that this is a pretty narrow base of support. We'll bring one hand to the chest and one hand to the belly. And I want you to notice that in this particular base of support, you can probably go forward quite a bit. Probably are a bit limited in how far back you can go. And a bit limited in how far to the side and how far to the side you can go because it's pretty narrow side to side. So it's going to tip more easily than cross-legged or Baddha Konasana position. From here, we're going to rise onto the knees. Let your knees start to splay away from one another a bit. This is one of the, I would say, mistakes that I see a lot of yoga teachers make in teaching. They teach that everything has to be geometric, parallel, and our bodies just are not designed that way. Hands to the glutes, lift the chest, squeeze the shoulder blades towards one another, but mostly feel this back here in the butt. And then cross at your shins if this is available to you, your knees, and sit down. Legs out in front of you, Dandasana, spread your toes. See if you can curl and uncurl your toes. And then a little physical therapy exercise that we teach very often, just writing the alphabet with your foot and ankle. And this is a pretty decent activity to start to inspire a little bit more proprioception, or kind of awareness of where your foot is in space. Obviously, it's not going to be nearly as elegant as if you were writing with your hand. Proprioception is another component of balance, pretty intimately tied to both the musculoskeletal and to the nervous system. Make sure you've switched legs and doing a couple of alphabets on this other side. Feel free to put your block under your knee like I am. Feel free to position your hands in a supportive way. I have no idea what letter I'm on. And then finally, set your block off to the side for a moment and bring the soles of your feet together. We've done a lot for the feet and ankles today, and hopefully you've got some ideas about that, but you also have some bigger picture ideas about all of the things that contribute to balance. One of my favorite things to do, because I have been walking a lot and wearing minimalist barefoot shoes, so I'm using these muscles of my arch a whole lot. And these inner calf muscles get tired, right? So I've been using my thumbs, both of them, finding the edge of the inside bone, your tibia, and just sort of pushing the muscles a little bit to the back. There's almost like a rotational component. If you do this with just one thumb, it's a little hard on those joints, but if you do it with two thumbs at the same exact time, it's called a dummy thumb, it actually disperses the pressure across twice as many joints. And you can even use your own body weight leaning back a little bit to get to that. By the way, if you're sitting in a chair for this, you would just bring your shin across like that if this is more comfortable, or this Dandasana variation. So same thing on the other side. Enjoy rocking back, inviting a calming down of your nervous system. And then as you're ready, set yourself up for Shavasana. We're going to come onto our backs and do a little bit of a twist on each side, but just have your blanket rolled up so that you can grab it, slide it under your knees, your thighs. Get everything else out of your way if you don't need it. Find your picnic sit and lower yourself down, vertebra by vertebra. This is my favorite base of support when my whole back is on the floor and I can just feel super grounded. Allow your knees to drop to one side and don't worry about stacking your knees. Don't worry about whether your shoulder blade comes to the floor or any of that geometric stuff. Just invite breath. Let's take it to the other side. Bring it right back to center. If there's any gentle, nourishing movements that would feel really good to you right now, this is your time. Just go ahead and take them. You can also slide your blanket under for Shavasana if you've got one. Hands can be wherever feels good, on your belly, by your sides. Letting everything settle down, just like a pool of water. And you're finally also welcome to join me in a couple minutes of meditation. So, whether you're in Shavasana or a seated meditation, it doesn't matter. Just invite breath easily in and out. Option of the box breath. Aware of everything that is now your base of support. Aware of how that base of support expands a little with your inhale. And how your mind cools a little with the exhale. There's no rush. If your mind wanders, just bring it back into this moment. Always scanning to see if anything is working that doesn't need to be working right now. On your back, invite your breath to deepen a little and the movement to travel into your fingers and into your toes. If you're upright, you can also wiggle fingers and toes or just stay in the stillness a little longer. From the back, roll to your side. Gently press up, keeping the eyes closed, meeting us. And seated with the palms together over the heart, drawing into the forefront of our minds and our hearts, one thing that we're grateful for. As you rest in that sense of gratitude, feel the corners of your lips turn up. Feel the wrinkles of the face kind of smooth out, where the good ones come in. And my hope is that for the rest of today, you stay so deeply connected to breath, to presence, to your body, to your proprioception, and that you benefited from this practice on as many levels as possible. Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your profound presence.